Good evening, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to Kallipolis Radio. Tonight, I'll be reading another of Plato's dialogues. This one is titled, The Second Alcibiades. Thanks for listening. And before we begin, I'd like to thank our channel members, Joshua Anolik and Torritz. If you are interested in becoming a member of the channel, you can find more information in the description below. Persons of the dialogue: Socrates and Alcibiades. We open with Socrates. Are you going, Alcibiades, to pray to the god? Just so, Socrates. You appear to have a serious look, and to be directing your eyes to the ground, as if thinking upon something. Of what should a person be thinking, Socrates? Of things, Alcibiades, of the greatest moment, as it seems to myself at least. For come, by Zeus, do you not think, when we happen to pray, either in private or in public, that the gods themselves sometimes grant some of those prayers, and some not, and to some persons they nod assent, but to some not? Very much so. Does it not seem then to you that there is need of much forethought, in order that a person may not unconsciously pray for great evils for himself, while thinking that he is praying for good, and that the gods may not happen to be in such a disposition as to grant whatever he happens to be praying for? Just as they say Oedipus did, in praying that his sons might divide their patrimony by the sword, and, when he might have prayed for his then-present evils to be averted, he uttered a curse that others might be superadded, and thereupon both these were brought to pass, and after these others too, many and terrible, of which what need is there to speak singly? But, Socrates, you have spoken of a man who was mad. For who, think you, of sound mind would venture to make such a prayer? Does it seem to you that to be mad is at all the contrary to being in one's senses? Perfectly so. Do not men seem to you to be senseless and sensible? Yes, to be so. Come then, let us consider who these are. For that there are men senseless and sensible you have admitted, and others who are mad. It has been admitted. Moreover, there are some men in a sound state of health? There are. And are there not others in a bad state of health? Certainly. These are not the same with those. They are not. Are there not others who are in neither of those states? Certainly not. For every man must of necessity be either in a diseased state or not. It seems so to myself at least. What then with respect to intellect and non-intellect? Have you the same opinion? How say you? Does it seem to you to be necessary for a man to be sensible or senseless? Or is there some third and middle state which causes a man to be neither sensible nor senseless? There certainly is not. It is necessary, then, for him to be in one or the other of those states. So it seems to me, at least. Do you not remember that you admitted this, that insanity is contrary to being in one's senses? I do. And that there is no middle or third state which causes a man to be neither sensible nor senseless? I admitted this too. But how can two different things be contrary to one thing? By no means. To be senseless, then, and to be mad seem to be nearly the same thing. They seem so. If then we should pronounce that all fools were madmen, we should pronounce rightly, Alcibiades. For example, if some of your equals in age happen to be senseless, as indeed they are, and some of your elders likewise, come, by Jove, do you not think that in this city there are few sensible men, but the majority senseless, whom you call madmen? Yes, I do. Think you then that, living under the same state with so many madmen, we should be delighted, or that we should not be buffeted and pelted and have long since suffered punishment for such acts as madmen are wont to commit? But consider, thou blessed man, whether this be the case. What then could it be, Socrates? For it appears nearly to be not what I just now fancied. Neither does it appear so to myself. But let us look at the matter in some such way as this. In what way do you mean? I will tell you. We understand that some men are in bad health, do we not? Certainly. Does it seem to you necessary for every man in bad health to have the gout, or a fever, or ophthalmia? Or does it not seem to you that a man, without suffering at all in this way, may be ill in some other disorder? For diseases, we suppose, are of many various kinds, and not these alone. I suppose there are. Does not every ophthalmia seem to be a disease? Yes. But is every disease ophthalmia? Certainly not, it seems to me. Yet still I am at a loss about your meaning. If, however, you will give me your attention, by considering the matter, both of us together, will peradventure discover it. I am giving you, Socrates, all attention, to the best of my power. Was it not agreed upon by us that every ophthalmia was a disease, but every disease was not an ophthalmia? It was agreed so. And it seems to me to have been correctly agreed, for all persons in a fever have a disease, but not all, however, who have a disease are in a fever. Neither have they all, I think, the gout nor ophthalmia. Every thing indeed of this kind is a disease, and they whom we call physicians say that diseases produce different effects, for all diseases are not alike, nor do they all act similarly, but each according to its own particular power. And yet they are all diseases, just as we understand there are in the case of workmen, do we not? Certainly. Such as shoemakers, carpenters, statuaries, and very many others, whom why need one mention in detail? All these have divided amongst them portions of handicraftship, and yet all are handicraftsmen. They are not, however, carpenters, nor shoemakers, nor statuaries taken all together. Certainly not. Just so have men divided folly amongst them, and those who have the largest share we call madmen, but those who have a less, silly and thunderstruck. But if we choose to speak of such in good-omened language, some call them high-spirited, but others simpletons, and others again harmless and inexperienced and speechless. You will also find upon inquiry many other names, but they all mean non-intellect, although they differ just as one art has been shown by us to differ from another, and one disease from another. Or how does it seem to you? To me, in this way. To the point, then, from whence we digressed, let us return back again. For it was proposed, I think, in the beginning of our conversation, to consider who are the senseless and the sensible, for it was agreed that some such existed, was it not? Yes, it was agreed. Whether then do you understand by the sensible those who know how to do and say what they ought? I do. And whom do you understand by the senseless? Are they not such as know neither of those things? Those very persons. Will not those persons, then, who know neither of those things, unconsciously say and do what they ought? It appears so. Now, of these very persons, Alcibiades, Oedipus, I said, was one, and you will find many of those living even now, who, though not influenced by anger as he was, pray for things hurtful to themselves, not fancying them to be so, but good rather. He indeed, as he did not pray for good, so neither did he fancy he was doing so. But some others there are who have suffered the very contrary to this. For I think that you, if the God to whom you happen to be going should appear to you, and, before you had uttered a prayer, first asked you, will it suffice for you to become a despotic king of Athens? And if you thought this a trifle, and no great thing, should add, and over all the Greeks. And if he should see that you fancied you would still have too little, unless he were to appoint you king of the whole of Europe, and should undertake not this alone, but that on this very day, according to your wish, all should perceive that Alcibiades, the son of Clinias, is their autocrat, I think you would walk away exceedingly delighted, as if you had met with the greatest good. I fancy, Socrates, that anyone else whatever would do so likewise, if such things were to happen to him. You would not, however, be willing that the country of, and absolute dominion over, all of the Greeks and barbarians should be yours in exchange for your life. I suppose not, for why should I, when I was about to make no use of them? What then? If you were about to make a bad and detrimental use of them, you would not be willing even in such a case? Certainly not. You see, then, that it is not safe to accept at random gifts when offered, nor for a person to pray that things may take place, if he is about to be injured through them, or to be totally released from life. Many, too, we could mention, who, after having longed for absolute power and labored to obtain it, as if about to enjoy some mighty good, have, on account of their tyranny, been plotted against and lost their lives. I think, too, that some events, which happened as it were but yesterday, have come to your ears. How that a favourite of Archelaus, tyrant of Macedonia, murdered his admirer, through his being as fond of absolute power as the tyrant was of him, and with the view of becoming the tyrant himself, and a happy man. But that, possessing the power for 3 or 4 days, he was in turn plotted against by some of his fellow friends and destroyed. You see, too, of our own fellow citizens, for this we have not heard from others, but know by being present ourselves, that such as have longed for, and obtained, the command of an army, some are even now exiles from the city, and others have ended their lives, and such as seem to have fared the best have passed through many trying dangers and terrors during the campaign itself, and when they have returned to their own country, have suffered from informers a siege not at all inferior to that which they have endured from foreign foes, so that some of them prayed they had never been at the head of an army, rather than to have borne a command. Now, if the dangers and toils had tended to their benefit, it would have had some reason, but now it is quite the reverse. And with respect to children, you will find in the very same manner how that some persons, after having prayed to them to be born, have, when they are born, come into the greatest calamities and sorrows. For some, whose children have been thoroughly wicked, have passed the whole of their lives in sorrow, and some, whose children were well behaved, have met with the misfortune to be deprived of them, and have come into calamities in no respect less than the others, and, like them, have wished rather that their children had never been born. And yet, although these and many other instances of the like kind are so very evident to persons, it is rare to find a man who would refuse what is offered, or who, if he is about to obtain it by prayer, would cease to pray for it. Nor would the majority refrain from absolute power if offered them, or the command of an army, or many other things, which when present do more harm than good. But they would, on the contrary, pray for their possession, should such things happen not to be present to anyone. And yet, after waiting a little time, they sometimes recant, and pray the reverse of what they prayed before. I have therefore my doubts that men do in reality accuse the gods unjustly, in saying that their evils come from them, for either by their own crimes or follies we should say, they griefs endure beyond their fated share. And that poet, Alcibiades, was near to being a sensible person, who, when connected with some friends void of understanding, and observing them to do and pray for things which it were better for them not to have, but which appeared to them to be good, thought proper to use in common a prayer, which he expresses somehow to this effect: O Zeus, our king, whatever is good, vouchsafe to us, if prayers we offer or do not, but evil, when we pray thee to avert, do thou ordain. To me, indeed, the poet appears to speak correctly and safely. But if you have aught in your mind against this sentiment, do not hold your tongue. It is a difficult matter, Socrates, to speak against anything which is said correctly. But I am thinking on that point of how many evils to man is ignorance the cause, since, as it seems, through it we are unconsciously doing to ourselves the greatest mischiefs, and, what is the worst, even praying for them, a fact which no one would fancy, but everyone would conceive this rather, that he is competent to pray for things the best for himself, and not the worst. For this would, in reality, be like a curse, and not a prayer. But perhaps, O best of men, someone who happens to be wiser than you or I would say that we do not speak correctly in blaming thus at random ignorance, unless we add that of some things and to some persons, and under certain circumstances, ignorance is a good, as it is to them an evil. How say you? Is there anything whatever of which it is better for any person whatever, under any circumstances whatever, to be ignorant than to know? So it seems to me at least, and does it not to you? No, by Zeus. I will not bring a verdict against you on the point of your being willing to do to your own mother what they say Orestes and Alcmaeon did, or whoever else may have happened to act in the same manner as they did. Speak, by Zeus, words of good omen, Socrates. There is no need, Alcibiades, of your bidding that person to speak words of good omen, who says that you would not be willing to do such a deed, but much rather him who says the contrary. But, since the deed appears to you to be so dreadful that it ought not to be mentioned so easily, do you think that Orestes, if he had been a sensible person, and known what it was best for him to do, would he have dared to commit any such act? By no means. Nor would, I think, any other man. Certainly not. The ignorance, therefore, of what is best is an evil, and to be ignorant of the best. So it appears, at least to me, and to him, and to all other men. So I say. Let us further consider this too. If it occurred to you on this very instant to think it were a better thing for you to take a dagger, and, going to the house of Pericles, your guardian and your friend, to ask, is he within, with the intention of killing only him, and no other person, and that the servants should say, he is within, I do not assert that you have an inclination to do any of these things, but if, as I think, it shall seem good to you, what surely nothing prevents, that to him, who is ignorant of what is the best, an opinion has at some time occurred, so that what is even the worst has been thought at some time to be the best. Or does it not seem to you it would be? Certainly so. If then, upon going within, you should see himself there, but not knowing him, should think he was some other person, would you still venture to kill him? No, by Zeus, I do not think I should. For you would not kill any person who happened to meet you, but only that very person whom you wish to kill. Is it not so? Yes. And if you made frequent attempts, but were always ignorant of his being Pericles, whenever you were about to do the deed, you would never make an attack upon him. Certainly not. What then, do you think that Orestes would have ever made an attack upon his mother, if in like manner he had not known her? I think he would not. For he too had it not in his mind to kill any woman who might meet him, nor the mother of any person whatever, but his own mother. Such is the fact. To persons then so situated, and having such fancies, it is better not to know such things. It appears so. Do you then perceive that of some things, and to some persons, and under some circumstances, ignorance is a good, and not, as it seemed to you just now, an evil? It is probable. Further still, if you are willing to consider what is after this, it would perhaps appear to you to be absurd. What especially, Socrates? That the possession of all other sciences, so to speak, is, unless a person possesses the science of what is best, very near to being seldom a benefit, but generally hurtful to the person possessing it. And consider in this way, does it not seem to you necessary that, when we are about to do or say anything, we ought to know, or previously fancy we know, or know in reality, what we are about to say or do rather readily? To me, it at least seems so. Do not then our public speakers, either knowing how to counsel, or fancying that they know, give us their counsel on the instant on every occasion, some about war and peace, others about the building of walls or furnishing harbors, and, in one word, whatever one state does to another state, or itself by itself, all takes place from the advice of the orators. You speak the truth. See then what is after this. If I am able. You surely call persons sensible and senseless. I do. Do you not call the many senseless, but the few sensible? Just so. And you call both so, with an eye to something. Yes. Would you call that man sensible who knows how to give advice, but without knowing whether a thing is better, and in what it is better? Certainly not. Nor him, I think, who knows war abstractly, but without knowing when it is better, or for how long a time it is better. Is it not so? It is. Nor if a person knows how to murder another, or to take away his property, or to cause him to be an exile from his country, without knowing when it is better, or to whom it is better to do so. Certainly not. The man, therefore, who possesses any knowledge of such a kind, unless the knowledge also of what is best follows at his side, now this is surely the same as the knowledge of what is beneficial, is it not so? Certainly it is. Shall we say that he is a sensible and a competent counselor, both for the state and himself, but that the man who does not do so is the contrary of these? Or how does it seem to you? To me, in this way. What then? Should a person who knows how to ride, or shoot with a bow, or wrestle, or box, or engage in any other kind of combat, or in anything else which we know by art, by what name will you call him, who knows what takes place the better according to each art? Will you not call him who knows, according to the equestrian art, an equestrian? Yes. And him who knows, according to the boxing art, a boxer? But him, according to the hautboy playing art, a hautboy player? And in the rest of cases surely analogously to these, or how otherwise? Not otherwise than in this way. Does it then seem to you necessary that the person knowing any of these is a sensible man, or shall we say that he wants much of being so? Much indeed, by Zeus. What kind of a commonwealth do you think there would be, composed of good bowmen and hautboy players, and still more of athletes and other artists, and of those mixed with such as we have just now mentioned, who know how to war in the abstract, and to murder in the abstract, and moreover of orators puffed up with the statesman's swell, but all devoid of the knowledge of what is best, and of that which knows when it is better to make use of each one of those things, and against whom? A bad one, Socrates, I would think. And you would say, I think, when you saw each one of these men full of ambition, and giving the greatest share he has in the commonwealth to that point, where he may happen to be best himself, I mean that which becomes best according to his own art, but of that which is the best for the state, and himself for himself having missed for the most part, as having, I think, trusted without intellect to opinion. Since then such is the case, should we not speak correctly in saying that such a commonwealth was full of great disorder and lawlessness? Right indeed, by Zeus. Did it not seem to us to be necessary that we ought previously to fancy we know, or to know in reality what we are about to say or do readily? It seems so. Should then a person do what he knows, or thinks he knows, and there follow that we have ourselves beneficially and profitably both to the state and himself to himself, is not, how not? But if he does, I think the contrary of these, there will be a benefit neither to the public nor himself. Certainly not. What then does it seem to you now, in the like manner, or somehow otherwise? Not otherwise than this. Did you not say that you called the many senseless, but the few sensible? I did. And do we not say again that the many have missed of what is the best, by having generally, I think, trusted to opinion without intellect? We say it. It is for the interest, then, of the many neither to know anything, nor to fancy they know, if they shall be more ready to do what they know, or fancy they know, and by doing so are about to be still more injured than benefited. You say what is most true. Do you see, then, that when I said that the possession of the other sciences is, unless a person possesses the science of what is best, very near to being seldom beneficial, and generally hurtful to the person possessing it, did I not appear to be speaking in reality correctly? If the not then, yet now it seems so, Socrates. It is requisite then for a state, and a soul that is about to live correctly to cling to this science, just as a person in sickness does to a physician, or a person about to sail in safety does to a steersman, by so much as the soul may not previously have a favorable wind, either respecting the possession of property or the strength of body, or anything else of such a kind. By so much the greater errors is it necessary, it seems, to arise from them. And he who possesses what is called much learning and much art, but is destitute of this very science, and is carried along by each of the others, will he not in reality justly encounter a violent storm, inasmuch as he is, I think, continuing at sea without a steersman, a time not long life of gods, so that it seems to me that here too suits the sentiment of the poet, which he expresses while he is bringing a charge against someone that trades many knew he, but knew badly all. But how, Socrates, does the verse of this poet suit here? For to me it seems to say nothing to the purpose. Nay, it is very much to the purpose, but this poet writes enigmatically, and so do nearly all the others. For the whole of poetry is naturally enigmatical, and it is not for a person who is to be met with anywhere to understand it. And, in addition to its being such naturally, when it seizes upon a man of grudging disposition and unwilling to make himself known, but desirous to conceal as much as possible his wisdom, it seems to be difficult beyond measure to understand what each of these poets mean. For you cannot, surely, think that Homer, a poet most divine and clever, was ignorant how impossible it is for a person to know a thing badly. For he it is who says that Margites knew many things, but knew all badly. But he speaks enigmatically, I suppose by introducing the word badly instead of the word bad, and he knew instead of to know. There is then a sentence composed unshackled by the meter, and it expresses what he meant, that he knew many trades, but that to know all was to him an evil. It is evident, then, that if to know many things was to him an evil, he himself was some worthless fellow, at least if we must give any credit to the reasonings previously produced. And so it seems, Socrates, to me, for I should hardly give credit to other reasonings if not to these. And correctly does it seem to me. Again, it seems to me. But come, by Zeus, for you surely see how great and of what kind is the difficulty and doubt in which you too appear to me to have a share, as you never rest at all in changing your place up and down, but what may have seemed especially to you, this to have gone secretly away again, and so seems no longer in a similar manner. Should the god, then, to whom you happen to be going, appear to you even now, and ask you, before you had prayed for anything whatsoever, whether it would be sufficient for you, if any of those things mentioned at the beginning were to take place, or should he leave it to yourself to make a request? How, think you, could you avail yourself of the opportunity? Either by accepting any of the things offered, or by praying yourself for something to happen. Now, by the gods, Socrates, I should not know what to say in such a case. But it seems to me to be a violent thing, and in good truth one of caution, in order that a person may not unconsciously pray for things evil, while fancying them to be good, and then, after waiting, as you said, a little time, recant and pray the reverse to what he did at first. Did not then the poet, whom I mentioned at the beginning of the argument, know somewhat more than we do, when he begged of Zeus to avert terrible things from us when praying? So it seems to me. The Lacedaemonians, therefore, Alcibiades, having admired this very poet, or having so considered themselves the matter, put up on every occasion in private and in public a similar prayer, by requesting the gods to grant them ever things honorable in addition to what are good, and no one has ever heard them pray for anything more. Accordingly, up to the passing time, they have been fortunate less than none, and even if it has happened to them to not be fortunate in everything, it was not on account of this prayer of theirs, but it is for the gods, I presume, to grant what a person happens to pray for, and the reverse. And I am desirous of telling you something else, which I once heard from certain elderly persons, how that, when differences arose between the Athenians and the Lacedaemonians, it so happened to our city that whenever there was a battle, by land or sea, it was unsuccessful, and never able to gain a victory. Thereupon the Athenians, brooking ill their doings, and at a loss for some contrivance to find an escape from their present evils, held a council, and it seemed to them that it would be best to send Ammon and inquire of him. And, in addition, this too likewise, on what account do the gods always give the victory to the Lacedaemonians rather than to us, who, of all the Greeks, bring them sacrifices the most numerous and the most beautiful, and have decorated their temples with offerings such as none else have done, and are wont to make to the gods processions the most costly and the most solemn each year, and to expend money such as all the rest of the Greeks never did together, whereas the Lacedaemonians have never paid the least regard to any of these things, but conduct themselves in so slighting a manner towards the gods, as to sacrifice on each occasion animals, maimed even, and, in all other matters, fall far short of us, not a little, in honoring the gods, although possessing property not less than our state. When the messenger had thus spoken, and had inquired of the oracle what they ought to do to find a deliverance from their present evils, the prophet made no other answer, for it is evident the god did not permit him, but calling the messengers, he said, To the Athenians thus saith Ammon. He saith that he prefers the good-omened address of the Lacedaemonians before all the sacrifices of the rest of the Greeks. These words he said, and nothing more. Now, it seems to me that by a good-omened address the god means only that prayer of theirs, for it is in reality much superior to the prayers of others. For the rest of the Greeks are wont, some of them, after placing by the altar oxen with gilded horns, and others presenting the gods with offerings to be hung up in temples, to pray for whatever they happen to desire, whether it be good or evil. The gods, therefore, on hearing their impious addresses, accept not their costly processions and sacrifices, so that there is need of much caution and consideration as to what is to be spoken and not. And you will find in Homer, likewise, other expressions similar to these. For he says that the Trojans, on taking up their night quarters, the perfect hecatombs to the immortals gave, and that the winds carried the savour of the fat to heaven, sweet-smelling, but the blessed gods refused to taste it, for by them was hated much the holy Ilion, and Priam too, and of the careful Priam subjects all, so that it was of no use for them to sacrifice, or to expend presents in vain, when they were thus hated by the gods. For the divine nature, I conceive, is not such as to be seduced by presents like a knavish judge, but we are giving a silly reason if we think to get the better of the Lacedaemonians in this way. For it would be a dreadful thing indeed if the gods looked to gifts and sacrifices, and not the soul, should a person happen to be holy and just. Nay, they look much more, I think, to this than to expensive processions and sacrifices, for which there is nothing to prevent those from having the power to pay each year, either individuals or states, who have sinned greatly against the gods, and greatly too against men. But they, as not receiving bribes, disdain all such things as these, as says the god, and the prophet of the gods. It seems then that justice and prudence are near to being honored above all things by the gods, and by men too that have any sense. Now the sensible and the just are none other than such as know what is meet to do, and say both towards gods and men. But I should be glad to hear from you what are your thoughts upon this subject. To myself, Socrates, the matter seems to be in no other way than it does to you and the god. For it would not be reasonable for me to vote contrary to the god. Do you not remember, then, saying that you were much at a loss, lest you should unconsciously be praying for evil things, fancying them to be good? I do. You see, then, that it is not safe for you to go to the god with the view of praying, in order that, should it so happen, he may not hear you speaking impiously, and receive no part of your sacrifice, and you, perchance, meet with something different. It seems to me, therefore, that it is best to keep quiet. For through your high spirit, for that is the fairest of names for folly, I think that you would not be willing to make use of the Lacedaemonian prayer. It is necessary, therefore, for a man to wait until he has learnt how he ought to conduct himself towards gods and men. But when, Socrates, will that time be? And who is he that will instruct me? For I should be very glad, I think, to see who the man is. It is he of whose care you are the object. But it seems to me, as Homer says of Minerva, that she removed the mist from before the eyes of Diomed, that he might clearly see both gods and men. So must he, in the first place, remove from your soul the mist that now happens to be present there, and then apply those things through which you will be about to know both good and evil, for now you seem to be unable to do so. Let him then remove the mist, or anything else that he pleases, as I am prepared not to fly from anything ordered by him, whoever he may be, if I am about to become a better man. And yet he has a very wonderful eagerness in your behalf. Till that time, then, it seems to me to be best to put off my sacrifice. And rightly it seems so to you, for it is safer than to run so great a risk. But how, Socrates? However, since you seem to me to have given good advice, I will put this garland round your brows, and to the gods we will then present crowns, and all the other customary offerings, when I behold that day arrive, and it will in no long time arrive, if they are willing. Well, I accept both this, and I would see myself readily accepting anything else given by you. And, as Creon, when he sees Tiresias wearing garlands, and hears that he had obtained them as the first fruits of spoils taken from the enemy, is made by Euripides, in Phoenicians 865, to say, "This crown as a happy omen have I worn, for well you know how tempest-tossed we lie." So do I place on myself this opinion on your part as an omen of good, for I seem to myself to be in no less a storm than Creon, and I would gladly be a victor over your admirers.